Talk more about the Conservatives, though, because Ruth Davidson, who's leader of the Conservatives in Scotland, says the advice she's taken is that the Scottish Parliament doesn't have powers to prevent Brexit.
Well, I'm not a constitutional lawyer like your previous guest, Gillian Maughan. I have, however, taken advice from one of my own team who is. The advice that I've taken suggests that this actually is not within the power of Holyrood. There will be a statement from the First Minister on Tuesday within the Parliament, and I look forward to her clarifying what, if any, legal advice she has taken to that effect. As I understand it, and as the advice has been given, and with the advice that you've just heard from your previous commentator and contributor, it would appear that she may either have been misinterpreted this morning or may have slightly overreached herself this morning in terms of what is within the legal bounds of Holyrood.
Now, today, of course, we here have been concentrating on the developments within the Labour Party. If I could look at what's happening in your party, the Conservative Party needs to find a new Prime Minister. Now, how do you suggest that process should go?
Well, I believe that it is important that we move to a state where we have nominees coming forward, that they're whittled down to two, as within the rules of our constitution within the party, and that's taken to members, and we get somebody installed in the sort of time frame that the Prime Minister outlined on Friday. I think that would be in everybody's best interest to make sure that we saw that continuity and passover happen as smoothly as possible.
Would you stand?
There is no mechanism for me to stand in terms of I'm not an MP. I do not seek to be an MP. I've got a big job here as the leader of the opposition in Scotland. And I think particularly when there is an issue regarding one of the very first things the First Minister said on Friday morning, within hours of the last vote being counted, that she announced to the world that one of her first acts had been to instruct Scottish Government staff to start and officials to start drawing up a second indie ref legislation. I think the job I've got here is going to be an incredibly important one for keeping our country together, because let's not forget that in terms of unions, the United Kingdom is a far bigger market for trade and resource to Scotland than the EU has been. It's more than 4 times the size and value of market than the EU has been. So I think I've got a pretty big job in my hands up here. Thank you very much.
It's not a foregone conclusion that Nicola Sturgeon will act sooner rather than later in terms of another independence referendum. Is there any doubt in your mind that she will at some point call for one?
Well, I think there's a lot of people in Scotland right now who are being very worried and disconcerted by these events. As you know, I campaigned vigorously on the other side. I was disappointed with the result. But I think what's important going forward is that we get the best trade deal for the UK, and I'll support the Scottish Government's part of being involved in that trade deal with the UK Government and other devolved legislations to make sure we get the best deal going forward. Now, there's lots and lots of unanswered questions. We don't know what's on the table, what course is the best for us to chart yet. And that's why I think it is so deeply disappointing that before we found out any of those answers, the very first announcement the First Minister made was to say that she'd got officials working on a second independence referendum. And now, we haven't moved Article 50 yet. We know there's 2 years even after it is moved. I do think that was slightly premature and added extra uncertainty on what is already an uncertain time.
How would you assess the mood in Scotland this afternoon?
Well, I think there's a lot of people in Scotland who are very worried. They've seen what's happened in the last 48 hours. There's many people who are disappointed because they voted in the other way. But, let's also not forget that over 1 million people voted to leave the EU from Scotland, around the same number that voted for the SNP government just 4 weeks ago. So it wasn't an inconsiderable amount. And I think there's a real wish now within Scotland that we start getting the answers to the very many questions that this result has thrown up, that we start plotting out the course that's best for our country Scotland, and our country, the UK, and then we start getting the trade deal that will secure the businesses and investment in Scotland that so many people's jobs rely on.
Finally, if you're not in a position able to stand south of the border, who would you back as the next Tory leader and obviously Prime Minister?
Well, I'm in an almost unique position in that as one of the party's leaders, I'm not an MP. My signature won't be sought for a nomination. I think it's incumbent upon me, my duty and my role as a leader within the party to assess all of the nominees as they come forward, to assess all of the you know, the platforms that they stand on and the contribution that they can make. And I have to wait until everybody comes forward to assess them on their merits, and then I'll give my answer to that. But, you know, I think it would be premature of me to start backing horses in this race before we see, you know, who's coming forward and on what platform they stand. The one thing I would say, though, is that I believe it's incumbent upon us as a party, because we're electing not just a nominee that we take to the country, but because we're electing a Prime Minister, I think it is incumbent upon all of us within the Conservative Party to elect somebody who can help bring this country together, because the division is pretty big. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm saying it has to be a Remainer or a Leaver, but it has to be somebody who has the personality, the ability and the strength going forward in terms of the negotiation that we need, somebody that can really do a job for Britain. So that's what I'm going to be looking for when the nominees come forward.
Ruth Davidson talked to me earlier. As you can see, I'm joined by Alistair Campbell, the former Director of Communications for Labour.